Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith, and we are getting ready to go over this DraftKings slate for Wednesday, November 6th. Hopefully help you win big. If you like anything you see in this video, and if we do help you in any way, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel to get alerted to more videos just like this. We do NBA videos every day that we can, and we try to hit NFL slates as they come as well. We will have a Thursday Night Football video before Thursday Night Football arrives, and then also a main slate NFL video for Week 10 as well. But right now we are diving into this. How many games are this slate? 10? I think it's a 10-game slate. Yes, this pretty hefty 10-game slate. Lots to like. Got some really good studs up top with Nikola Jokic, Doncic, guys like that, and then lots of value, and we will touch all of that. But we are going to go position by position, highlight the guys we like the most, obviously talk about value, player ownership, projections, all that fun stuff. So let's get started at point guard. Taylor, right away up top, Luka Doncic is the best projecting point guard with a 60-point fantasy projection. Because of the presence of Jokic and a lot of other good plays, he is not carrying ownership, coming in at only 8%. That's a little alarming. I know he has 11.5K, but the Bulls are an amazing matchup. They have the fastest pace in the NBA currently, and obviously they don't have very good defense. So I mean, if we're going to be underweight as a field here on Luka, I have interest. How are you feeling about Luka?
Yeah, I think him being low owned is a mistake if that holds. I think the matchup is about as good as it gets. He hasn't been great this season relative to his typical standards, but he did show something in the last game. Played 42 minutes, so that's nice to see. There should be more than enough value. There are a ton of guys who are questionable as of now. Zion, LaMelo, AD, Zach LaVine, Jose Alvarado. There's going to be a lot of cheap stuff on this slate. It'll make it more than easy enough to pay for him. And I think it's possible to play him and Jokic together. So, it might be if we get the value. As of now, maybe not, but I would like to do that if I can. So,
it's possible, my friend, because you and I are on the same wavelength. That is my preferred strategy because there's a lot of people living in the mid-range here. And we'll get to that. There are, warranted for sure, because there's a lot of really good plays. And I like those plays too. But if these guys are going to go remotely overlooked, I love the idea of pairing them. There's just an incredible amount of value on this slate. So before we get to that, let's keep dropping it down here. I don't personally have any interest in SGA. He is cheaper than Luka. He projects decently, 51 fantasy points, and he's going to be even less owned than Luka. But I don't know. I would rather just pay 1,000 more for Luka, or just drop down to a couple of the guys that we're going to talk about in a second. So, anyways, how are you feeling about SGA at that price and projection?
Not really getting there. The matchup against Denver's not horrible, but don't love it. And on a huge slate like this, point guard and center are going to be loaded positions. So there's a lot of other stuff in the mid-range to like, and Luka up top I much prefer to SGA, even with the $1,200 price difference between the two. I see why you would play SGA, but probably not for me on this slate.
Yep, agreed. I'm not going to say you can't play him, but he's priced just right at 10.3. The projection's good, and no ownership. All of that is pretty appealing, I won't lie, but why play SGA at 10.3K when you can play Cade Cunningham at 8.5K? Cade Cunningham is arguably the best value at the position when you factor in ceiling. Obviously, Russell Westbrook, 5K flat. That's kind of a core play here. But, I mean, he's pushing for 50 fantasy points. He is garnering ownership, pushing for 21% or more possibly on the slate. He is a big reason why I am kind of all in on going Luka Jokic, because he is going to carry ownership, and there are a couple other guys that are going to carry ownership too. That said, Cade looks awesome. He's still way too cheap for who he's been. Plus, he has a great date with the Hornets. So I'm going to lump in Jalen Brunson in that conversation at 8.7K. He also looks good against the Hawks. So how are you feeling about Cade and Brunson?
Yeah, I like them both. I like Brunson a little more. I think the matchup is a little bit better for him. Another guy in this range I'm getting to a lot is Kyrie at 8.2. Love Luka for all the same reasons. I love Kyrie. He looks still a little cheap for who he is typically. So not sure I'd play them together on a huge slate. I don't think there's a need for that, but I'm getting to a ton of Kyrie and I'm getting to a ton of Luka. Brunson looks great. Cade maybe a little bit less so as the most expensive or more expensive than Kyrie, a little bit less than Brunson. But I just think the matchup for Brunson is so good that I'll be flocking to him a little bit more. Plus, I always like playing the Knicks, who play like 40 minutes a game.
Yep, I agree. I like Cade just fine, but Brunson's only $200 more, and he does get the better matchup, and he's coming in at less ownership, about half the ownership of Cade. So for tournaments, I'm going to go Brunson there for sure. Both look great. You could pair them together if you don't want to go up for 2 studs or even 1 stud. That is fine. On the Kyrie play, he is carrying 16% ownership. That to me is just more reason to go get Luka on this slate. All these guys together, it's like it feels like, living in the mid-range is kind of going to be a popular route for this slate, and maybe people are just going to pick the 1 stud to go with, because we do have Anthony Davis, we do have Trae Young, and we do have SGA. So it's not like Jokic and Luka are the only studs to pay up for on this slate. But obviously Kyrie is in a smash spot, and he is only 8.2K, so I definitely am not going to say he's a bad play by any means. Ja Morant has a pretty good projection for his price at 9.2K. Just mentioning him, I'm not seeing him as a priority. I'm not paying 10.6K for Trae Young. The projection and price just doesn't align for me on this slate. I'd rather go up to Luka or go down to Brunson or Cade. I will just mention, as far as price point goes, Donovan Mitchell at 8.4K and Tyrese Haliburton at 8K flat. They remain really nicely priced options. They project okay, and they aren't going to carry ownership. So as pure GBP pivots away from Cade, Brunson, and Kyrie, they are viable and they look interesting. There's just so many other good options that I don't see them as priorities whatsoever, and I would like their projections to be a little bit better. So any thoughts on those guys? How you feel about them?
I like Haliburton a lot. Orlando's a bit shorthanded, maybe not as good defensively as they would be at full strength. Haliburton with Nesmith out, Nembhard questionable, played 36 minutes in the last game. I think Nembhard did play in that one. So, there's potential for that again. There's potential for a little more if Nembhard is out. Not going to be owned. I love that play. I have minor interest in Devin Booker, like as a completely unowned pivot away from chalk in that range. There are some guards that will be owned. Matchup against Miami is not very good, but Booker has a pretty high floor and a ceiling typically. So yeah, there is a lot to like at the high end point guard tonight.
Yeah, we can go down further and get Derek White at 6.9K flat. He's still projecting well with Jaylen Brown, and of course, Porzingis still out too. Jalen Suggs at 6.9. He has a massive role with Banchero out. Pushing for a 40-point fantasy projection. I like him at 6.9K. And then, of course, you have the free square of the night, Russell Westbrook at 5K flat with no Jamal Murray. Obviously, Aaron Gordon is out also for Denver, so it just makes him look even better from a usage perspective. I think, if you want to just start it off, okay, where do I start? Who do I play at point guard? I think Russ is the lock for me. If it's not even a flag plant, it's just he looks so obvious. It's not even funny. I'm just going to play Russ, and then if I circle back to one of these point guards, it's probably going to be Luka because there's so much value on this slate. But if you don't want to pay for Luka, I'm looking at Brunson and then Cade and those other guys you mentioned, Kyrie, Haliburton. And even Booker, I guess that Booker would probably be ranking pretty low in that group. But those are the guys I'm looking at the most. And then I did mention Suggs and White. They're just too cheap for their current roles, given the guys that are out for their respective teams.
Yeah. I don't have a ton of interest in Suggs. I think he's 6,900. That's pretty close to what his ceiling would be, I think. And there's just a ton to like. I think Austin Reeves in that range is fine. He's 6,100. D'Angelo Russell only 5,600.
Old ass Chris Paul.
Free square, I agree, but I'm a little concerned they're going to get their doors blown off. But it is what 5K. He should be 6K, 6,500. He's just way too cheap. So don't really see a way around it. I have a bad feeling about that game, but he's a very obvious guy.
Yeah, but Jokic is still there. They still have MPJ. Russ can get there in 3 quarters anyways at 5K. So I'm not worried about Russ. I'd be a little bit worried about Jokic if you're paying almost 12K for him and banking on a 70-point outing. But that's
why
possibly...
I think Luka might be a better play if Jokic is going to be more popular, because Luka's game should not... I guess they could blow out the Bulls, but at least they're on the right end of the blowout.
Jokic isn't coming in with ownership either. They're both they're capped at 10% here. So if that actually holds firm, I really like the idea of pairing them and just hoping that Denver can stay competitive there. Anything else you see at shooting guard? I did mention the old aging Chris Paul. I think he looks fine at 5.9 because the Spurs have a ton of injuries. He's been playing big minutes. He's been crushing too. So I don't know if he's really a priority because his price has come up and there's so many good options here. But he's projecting for what under?
Amount.
Yeah, he's projecting for under 10% ownership. I have no problem getting him whatsoever.
I don't mind Jaden Ivey either. Playing pretty well to begin the season. Matchup against the Hornets is not imposing. Another value I really like is TJ McConnell, 4,200 off the bench. I'd like him more if Nembhard is out, of course. 20 minutes off the bench in the last game with Nembhard in and Nesmith out. He's just excellent per minute, and if Nembhard is out, the minutes should rise a bit. 4,200 I think is super interesting for him because he always has a ceiling.
Yeah, one other point guard I'll mention is Ao Dosunmu, just in case Zach LaVine is out again. He smashed with 25 real points last time with LaVine out. And obviously, just as a kickback to the Mavs, if you end up playing Kyrie and or Luka, he's on the other side of that game and is way too cheap if that is indeed the case again.
If Alvarado's out, who's going to play point guard for the Pelicans? Is it going to be like Brandon Boston, who's not a point guard?
Yeah, well, I like Brandon Boston. 37 minutes last game, 4.2K. They got nobody, dude. They have, Antonio Reeves.
Who is that?
I mean,
I see him there. I don't know who he is.
Jalen Noel. He's there too. At 3K flat, I'll play Jalen Noel if he's in there.
He starts,
Jamal Cain. I don't really care. The Pels thing is just like it's got a life of its own. Cleveland game is not a good matchup, but they have freaking nobody. Like Zion's probably out. Trey Murphy's out. Jordan Hawkins is questionable. Herbert Jones is out. DeJounte, CJ, like everybody's dead. So if Zion is out, I don't want to pay out for Brandon Ingram in this game because it's probably going to be a blowout. And there's so many other good plays anyways. But I will gladly eat a ton of value from the Pels, even if it's chalky.
Don't think you're wrong for that.
Of course, as you're kind of alluding to, we don't know who's starting, though, so I don't want to really commit to anybody. The only one that does look good right now, provided Zion is out, is Boston at 4.2K. But, I mean, Noel at 3K flat is the one I'd really be kind of looking for in the event he ends up starting and Zion is out. All right, let's move on to shooting guard. A lot of the same plays are going to trickle over here, as is always the case. Kyrie Irving leads the way with the best projection at shooting guard. Brandon Ingram is right behind him. You can play Brandon Ingram if you want. Whether Zion is in or out, he is a good play based off of price and role. But the Cavs are not a fun matchup for DFS. And that game, I mean, that game is probably not going to stay very close. And he'll be the first guy to get yanked if he's out there by himself. Spida is always in play. We mentioned Spida and Devin Booker. We mentioned Derek White. You mentioned Jaden Ivey. I think all these guys are totally fine. And this is probably going to be a spot where I'm either going to target somebody in the mid-range like Derek White at 6.9. I think his price is still really good. Or I'm probably just going to punt entirely, like with somebody like Jalen Noel or Dosunmu that I mentioned before. If LaVine is out, I really like Dosunmu at 4.4K. I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's just like probably a value play here. I will say the Spurs are shorthanded, so Champagny at 4.5K, that's not bad. I don't mind that if you don't want to go with, if Dosunmu isn't really a play with LaVine in, or if there's not another guy like Brandon Boston is eligible, obviously at shooting guard and small forward. I will mention one other punt. Julian Strawther, he did get a good amount of minutes last game, and with no Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray, that could be the case again. So he's on my radar, although there's a better Denver value that I'm sure you'll agree on.
Brown? Who do you like? Is Brown someone you named? Christian Brown?
Yeah, but he's 5.3K, so I don't know for sure if I'm going to make him a priority. Nothing wrong with him at all.
But I think he's playable in the minutes.
Oh, absolutely. He's basically the same price as Russ. You could pivot off of Russ if you wanted to go be really bold. I won't be that bold. But I think, honestly, Denver is pretty shorthanded, so you can stack up like 4 Nuggets tonight if you really want to, if you think the game's going to stay close. Jokic, Russ, Brown.
Yeah.
And then maybe Peyton Watson, but we'll get to him. But Strawther at 3.7K, he's in play. I think he's a viable option.
A few others I like who are not. It doesn't look like they're going to be that popular. Benedict Mathurin starting for Nesmith, 32 minutes in the last game. I think he started the last few games without Nesmith. And obviously Nembhard, like we talked about, being questionable, could open up even more minutes. And then a guy who never gets owned. He was awful in the last game, but he played 40 minutes. They're playing the Hawks. Mikal Bridges, 6K flat, shooting guard, small forward. I love that. Atlanta gives up a ton of threes. Knicks have a super high total. Plays a ton of minutes. He's just a good price, and I think Bridges is like going to be my flag plant of the day.
Okay. I mean, the price is nice. The minutes are nice. I just don't really trust him, really.
I mean, he had a bad game against Boston to begin the season, and then he was rough in the last game, but the minutes are insane, and he's 6K flat. And he has guard forward. I think he's a strong play.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say against it other than he's Mikal Bridges, and he hasn't really exhibited much of a ceiling. But at 6K flat, it's not like you're taking on crazy risk for a guy with that kind of role. But I mean, he just kind of feels like OG Anunoby to me. Like, yeah, he's going to be out there for 40 minutes, but is he going to get?
I like OG Anunoby today.
Yeah, I mean, minutes are minutes. It's the currency for DFS.
Hart and Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, it's Knicks versus Hawks, man. I don't have a problem with it whatsoever. All right, I think that does it for shooting guard. I will mention Jordan Hawkins at 6K just in case he's in and we can't take advantage of the Pels value. He would have a pretty good role, even though the matchup against Cleveland stinks. I would not make him a priority, but he would be in play because he could have a monster role. All right, over at small forward, leading the way is Jason Tatum. I swear the Celtics play every single day. Tatum remains a great play, 10.2K. The only problem is the Warriors are not the best matchup in the world. Jaylen Brown and Zinger remain out, though, so his role is as good as it gets. He's pretty much a lock for 50 to 60 fantasy points every day, and he comes in with by far the best projection at small forward. So if you want to play Jason Tatum, you can. I just don't see why I'm going to do that. I'd rather just go up to Luka or Jokic or just drop down and live in the mid-range. Speaking of the mid-range, with Anthony Davis questionable, LeBron James looks like a great play at 9K flat. He's honestly a good play at that price anyways, but if Brow is out, it's going to be really hard to get away from chalky LeBron. Currently, he is not chalky, though. And then Brandon Ingram is third in line with the third best projection. We already talked about him. So how do you feel about Tatum and James? And then going after Ingram in that kind of mid-range tier, who else stands out for you at small forward?
Yeah, I'm not getting a ton of Tatum. That's to be the case every day. It always roasts me, but I do like LeBron. I like Ingram in the high-end range. That's really it. I'm otherwise paying down. Bridges I mentioned liking here. Anunoby's only 5K. Hart for 6'3". Like, all those guys look fine to me. MPJ for 6'2" with no Gordon and Murray. Tari Eason even for 4-5. Like, he's had a roll off the bench. San Antonio, not the best matchup so far this season, but I think there's upside to be had with him. And then the obvious value du jour here is going to be Najee Marshall at 3-4, starting presumably for PJ. Elite matchup. They have a super high total projected for over 30 minutes. He's near min salary. It's going to be really hard to fade him, I think, as well in this slate. And I don't really think you should.
Yeah, I'll just mention the likes of Jalen Williams, Jimmy Butler, and Franz Wagner just because they are priced pretty nicely, but I just don't really see why we should be playing them when Josh Hart is there at 6.3K, MPJ at 6.2K. Those guys feel like comparable plays, and they project about as well, so I would rather just play them. But I'm with you. I'm probably just punting small forward. I will mention Tristan Da Silva for Orlando, played a bunch of minutes last game. Obviously, Banchero's out. He's played 31-plus minutes in each of his last two games. So he is on my radar at 3.9K. Obviously, Najee is probably going to be the monster chalk of the slate, and rightfully so. No PJ Washington. Gosh, he's really owned. I don't think I want to go away from Najee, but if I get any reason to, I might. 42% ownership. God, it's gross. Trying to see anybody. Stephon Castle for the Spurs. I mean, he's going to get minutes. He's projecting for 28 minutes. He is also carrying a little bit of ownership. But with all their injuries, he could push for like 30-plus minutes in this game and be pretty interesting at 4K flat.
Keldon Johnson also. No Sohan,
cheap.
so minutes should be there in theory for him. Not
I'll
sure
mention Champagne again, too.
But I think Keldon's a pretty interesting play.
Dylan Brooks at 4.4K. He is banged up, so make sure he's actually playing, but he is still a good value because he plays a ton of minutes out there for Houston. I mentioned Strother. He's okay.
If Dylan's out, I think, because Tari's also questionable, but if Dylan is out, it might be Amen Thompson's season.
It might. He's only 4.6K as well, so I like that quite a bit. Yeah, keep an eye because Tari's questionable too. So if one of those guys are out, Ahmed would look pretty darn appealing at 4.6. I don't think there's anything else really that stands out as small forward. I mentioned, is he small forward or just power forward? Yeah, Peyton Watson. We'll talk about him in a second. Who's the other guy though for Denver? Oh, Strauss, I already talked about him. And Brown is 5.3K. Those are good values too. I feel like as far as like safety goes, Brown is the much better play. He's going to play like 36 minutes here, so he looks good too. Yeah, I just think in general, small forward is a good position to save money at. You like Mikal Bridges quite a bit at 6K flat, so like you're saving 4,000 at small forward if you go from Tatum to Bridges. I'm not really with you on Bridges tonight. I like the minutes and the price, but I'm just not there. His projection is not very good. All right, so power forward, Tatum again leads the way. You have LeBron there too. Zion, if he's in, I guess, is viable. I don't really like the matchup. It's just not the spot I want to target Zion personally. I'd rather just pay $300 less and go get a completely unknown KD, or I'll just keep going down and look at Siakam or Jalen Williams or something like that if I want to stay in that range. But this is another spot where we can end up paying down because obviously Najee can be used at power forward as well. And then Peyton Watson, who I talked about, 3.4K for Peyton Watson, who is going to get some run. Let's see what he did last game. 31 minutes, 29 fantasy points. So no Aaron Gordon, so he's going to play. So I like him quite a bit. Probably for me at forward in general, it's either LeBron at 9K if I want to pay up, or I'm dropping down to Najee and Peyton Watson. That's probably what I'm doing on this slate.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of power forward only guys that we haven't already mentioned at small forward, like obviously Watson. You can go back to the well with Jaren Jackson. He was horrible the other day, but he always has upside. 7K flat's pretty good for him as well. And then Tobias, I guess you can play 5,800 minutes, but it's fucking Tobias, so I'm not going to do that.
That's true. All right, let's kick it over to center to wrap things up. Leading the way, of course, is going to be Jokic with 62 fantasy point projection. Right now, he is not owned, coming in under 10% ownership. You can say the same for Anthony Davis. He is averaging or projecting for 5 fewer fantasy points. And then behind him is Wemby, coming in with a 55-point fantasy projection. You can play any of these guys. They're all coming in at under 10% ownership. It will be interesting to see where that lands as we get closer to lock, especially like if Brow is out, if Zion gets ruled out officially, and all these things. So definitely update your lineup optimizer and let's we'll get a better idea as to where everybody rests. Right now, though, if Jokic is going to be at 10% ownership or less because of how this slate looks, I love him. I'm going to play him probably, like I said with Luka. That's my opening strategy for this slate. But if you want to play Anthony Davis if he's in, or you want to drop down and save 1.3K and play Wemby, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's the only thing is it's not like you're gaining monster leverage or anything because none of these guys are carrying dominant ownership. If you want to go down from center even further, you have Chet, you have Vooch, you have Şengün, you have Cat. All these guys look really good. I have no problem with them. I just don't see them as priorities on this slate. They would just be pure tournament plays. To me, though, this is not the position to punt. This is not where I'm saving my money. I'm saving my money at shooting guard, small forward, and power forward tonight. I mean, I guess technically I'm doing it at one guard slot with Russ. But there's just too many good centers up top for sure. There's 3 like elite centers who can get 70 points on the slate. I want one of them. And right now it's going to be Jokic for me.
Yeah, it's always a little scary to fade center, but there are some cheap ones. Jokic, I love. Wemby, I love on the slate against Houston. Towns, I mentioned liking all the Knicks. He's a Knick, so I like him. Not really getting to AD a ton. The 2 cheap ones that I think are interesting are Neemias Queta. If he starts again for Boston, he's only 3,200 against Golden State. And then Zach Edey, who I think I mentioned on the last show, against Brooklyn.
Yeah, and he fucking smashed.
He did.
So that was an amazing call.
Now.
Yeah, if you want
29 minutes in the last game, that's the most he's played all year. So I don't know if you can project that. I don't think that's wise. I think RG had him at 20. But even at 20 minutes for 4,400, like he projects okay. I think there's obviously room for upside there. There's also potential for foul trouble for him against AD and LeBron, of course, but I don't really play for that. I don't worry about that. If he's not going to be owned, I think taking shots on him is pretty interesting again.
Yeah, the Kada / Cornette thing is not something I really want to mess around with, but I get it. 3.2K for Kada. Obviously, he's a better play compared to Cornette, especially if he starts. It's still a little scary, but yeah, I mean, you can play 2 centers on the slate too, obviously. So you could go and get whatever one you want to pay up for and then slide Kada into utility. But if you're going to punt center, I'm with you 100%. My preferred option is going to be Edie. He's just, I mean, last 50 fantasy points in his last game in just 29 minutes. Obviously, the Lakers down low are not the easiest draw. You mentioned foul trouble, just in general, going up against Brow. I mean, if Brow's out, though, then that gets a lot easier, I'd say. But either way, 4.4K for a hyper-efficient player who has been a good points per minute guy so far. I like it a lot. I'm just not going to make it my my like top center. Like I want to pay for a premium center on this slate. And then if it works out and he slides into my utility spot at 4.4K, I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Works for me.
Oh, one other guy in the same price range, Daniel Gafford at 4.5K. Derek Lively is questionable, and obviously PJ Washington is out. So Gafford could get a lot of run in a really, really nice spot against the Bulls. So at 4.5K, by the way, a little bit of revenge game. So yeah, he played for the Bulls, right?
Who?
Gafford.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking of like Wendell Carter at the same time. They both played for the Bulls, so I was right no matter what. But yeah, Gafford looks pretty interesting. I think he or Edie could easily be gotten to, and that could work out okay. All right, so let's wrap this up here. Give us your number one flag plant of the slate and your overall strategy as far as how you're approaching builds.
Probably going to eat the chalk with guys like Watson and Russ and Najee. Like, it just looks too good. They're too cheap for what roles they're playing on this slate. And it's very easy on a slate of this size to get different elsewhere. I think Bridges is a very strong play that's not going to get owned. I guess I would call him the flag plant. But, you know, Brunson, Halliburton, Kyrie, Luka, Jokic, like there are a million ways to play this slate. So it does look very good for tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. We're very much aligned. I might not play Mikal Bridges, or right now I'm not playing any Knicks, even though they all look great. I'd like to find a way to get to Brunson, but right now it's not really there. I might have to drop down from Luka or Jokic if that's what I want to do. But I could just end things with actually I could Cat at 8.1K can slide into my lineup. So this is where I stand right now. I'm eating the Russ chalk. I'm eating the Najee chalk. I'm eating the Peyton Watson chalk. So they are core plays for me. They are in there. And then my other values, just as placeholders, are Jalen Noel, Da Silva for Orlando. Those are the only other values. And then I'm paying up for Jokic and Luka. Now, obviously, if things update and those guys are like the slate shifts and everybody goes away from the mid range and they're going to a 2-stud build like that, that might change the way I want to approach the slate. But as things stand, everybody is looking at, Cade and Brunson and all these other guys. Let's see. Let's look at where the ownership is at in general, just to give you an idea of where the slate is looking. So Russ, good chalk. Najee, good chalk. Watson, good chalk. But then we're looking at Josh Hart, like I said, Cade, Miles, Hero, Jalen Williams. All these guys are carrying ownership. Kada, who I will probably just fade then if he's going to be almost 30% owned. That's one value play that I wouldn't mind getting away from. And then those top 2 studs suddenly are not owned enough on a slate where they can obviously get 70 or 80 fantasy points and just nuke it. So that is my strategy. It seems like we're pretty aligned. It's just going to kind of depend on where ownership is at and possibly what you do with Jokic, I think, right?
Yep.
All right. That does it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it did, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel so you get alerted to future videos just like this. Thanks for watching and good luck.